Magic the Gathering players seem to have lost the plot. They've forgotten the fact that we're here for an accessible card game that we can promote in the gathering and get people to just play the damn game that we love. Where are the people spouting for reprints? Where are the people that promoted accessibility in a format? Where are the people that always touted Rule 0? And you know, on this channel, we're pro proxy, we're pro Rule 0. You can play whatever you want when you're playing Commander with me. When it comes to Commander, there are rules to it, but again, it is a community driven format. There's a lot of ideas around the community in terms of balance, in terms of pricing, in terms of what accessibility should be. But at the end of the day, it's about the gathering, like back to front. For constructed players, for Commander players, it is about the gathering. The Magic is kind of interwoven in there. Gathering is key, and we should be promoting a welcoming environment. So first and foremost, I just want to get out of the way that the people threatening or just being outright like disrespectful to the Commander Rules Committee, all of them can go suck an egg. All right, let's just get that out there immediately. These are people that have put a lot of time and effort into making decisions like this. And again, they don't have any connection, necessarily direct connection to the R&D team. So a lot of people thinking about how, you know, Nadu was designed for Commander, but now it's being banned. You have to remember that the Rules Committee, again, is not an entity directly under Wizards of the Coast. They may be affiliated or just kind of related, but they don't make those decisions, and they aren't necessarily a part of that testing team. So get that out of the way. Nadu is just a meme. It's designed for Commander. It was banned, but again, not directly related. The second piece is the equity loss. And I think that's a big point here. I think a lot of the frustration is coming from the idea that a lot of people think this is an investor's game. And I'm sorry if you believe that, because the marketing, you fell for it. You've become the whale. Magic the Gathering is not about investing. You're not going to go to a yard sale and open up a binder full of like the OG duels and a Black Lotus that some old chap at 75 said, oh, I used to play this game with my kids, and you know what, you can have this for 30 bucks. Like, you're not going to get that dream pull. That dream is dead, and you should not be looking at Magic the Gathering as an investment portfolio. And I think there is something to be said around value and how people could be, you know, they could be promoting more communication between the RC and its community, but also couldn't that be seen as like kind of insider trading? There's already some musings around, you know, different price spikes of like Mana Crypt and Jewel Lotus, and how certain trades throughout the market may lead to some ideas of insider trading, and how people in the Rules Committee and friends thereof sold their copies of these cards. I mean, look, full disclosure here, I don't own any of these cards except for Dockside. I don't care. I lost 90 bucks on Darkside, whatever. Doesn't matter to me. I'll just replace it with like a Search for Iskanta or something. I don't know. Like I have it in an Izzet deck. There's plenty of other powerful cards in there. I'm not going to miss Dockside like that. And I think like when it comes to pricing, people talking about millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars being lost in the market. And to be fair, Mana Crypt is no longer playable anywhere relevant, I would say. Vintage Cube is probably the biggest one, but Vintage Cube is so unique that you do have like not necessarily like a ban list. There's no ban list for Vintage Cube. It's a cube. It's a curated, you know, if you wanted to ban something, just take it out of the cube. You know what I mean? It's restricted to Vintage, but Vintage is primarily being played on Magic Online. So it's not really relevant in that context for like paper play, right? We're not worried about the price of, I really hope we're not worried about the price of Mana Crypt on digital platforms. But in terms of paper platforms, I imagine a lot of these cards will now plummet. Jewel Lotus is no longer playable anywhere. I shouldn't say that. It is playable, but it just won't do anything. You add mana to your color pool, but like, unless you're worried about like mana burn, that's not going to do anything to you. So again, an unplayable card specifically designed for Commander and being a forefront of Commander marketing. We saw it in Commander Masters and one of the kind of front box designs, and even the artist for Jewel Lotus has kind of come out on Twitter and lamented like some of their feelings around it and kind of unbanning it. But I think like the big problem with this whole communication angle is the fact that you know, it's not consistent. They even addressed in the article the fact that they don't want to ban Soul Ring because it doesn't necessarily meet the threshold of like that aggressive fast mana. It's like a couple of things combined coming together. And when it comes to this type of like philosophy, it's had a big effect on the cEDH community, talking about the metagame where a lot of decks kind of feeling like they need to catch up with tools like this. But it feels like if your deck is built around like one or two primary artifacts, like shouldn't you be changing the deck that you're playing around? I mean, the cEDH community right now is being dominated by Rogsai. a deck using a 0-mana legendary and another legendary primarily for the blue and black colors, just to be able to kind of play the cards that you need that care about your commander. You play Rograk, which is 0 cost, allowing you to take advantage of things like the 0 cost moxes that care about a legendary being out, or like the cards that are free when your commander is out, like all this type of stuff. You play that deck and some of the most powerful cards out there in Magic, and that's the top of the cEDH metagame, whereas now the other decks in the metagame use stuff like Jewel Lotus and these cards to be able to catch up and keep up. So the metagame is going to shift there, but I'm not much of a cEDH player. I'm just kind of speaking on what I've seen on the internet. So for all you cEDH players, talk to me down below about what your thoughts are. But on that, I want to talk back on the gameplay here. When it comes to the casual environment, when I see casuals getting upset at this, like, aren't y'all like here for aren't y'all here for accessibility and reprints and more people playing the game? Why don't you just proxy these cards? Why don't you just rule 0 them back in, right? These are things like that are much easier in person. It's much easier for you to ask to be able to play a card than it is to stop someone else from playing a card. One, it's positive. It's bringing about interaction and bringing about a different angle of play. Whereas the other piece, which is telling someone not to play the game, is bringing out a sense of negativity. It's stopping someone from doing something, whereas you're kind of allowing someone to do something else. And of course, you're bringing it up. You have to expect that there is going to be a level of no being addressed. So you're already kind of going into it expecting that. So again, why in a casual table are people worried about their investments? This was the whole thing that people were afraid of in regards to like removing the reserve list. All these people are going to come out of the woodworks talking about their investment, my duels, my this, my that. None of that matters, right? Y'all lost like, I don't know, $500. Like if y'all were that worried about $500 of value being lost, why don't you just sell the cards? Like it just doesn't make any sense to me. Like people are worried about all this like future money when the money is more valuable to you right now, right? Like that's like a basic concept that like I think a lot of people need to understand, right? Like over time you accrue the value, but if you needed the money that bad, if you're worried about it that much, isn't it more valuable to you right now? Why don't you just sell out of the cards? Like I think I see a lot of Magic people on Twitter that, you know, their car breaks down, something happens in their personal life, and all of a sudden they're selling a bunch of cards. Why don't we just make better financial decisions and sell these cards off? Because I think in a lot of cases for especially EDH players, I think a lot of the groups that you play in would just be welcome with you playing proxies in general, right? I haven't heard a take on proxies that isn't like anti-proxy, that isn't just elitism, how people prefer you to have the cards. And it's mostly just that whole, you know, that school tuition argument that goes around every year. I paid my way through school, so other people should pay their way through school. You know, that whole, like, we're not looking forward to the greater, you know, the greatness of humanity. We're here for the downfall of other people because we've suffered. Just because we're miserable, other people should be miserable too. I don't understand any of this, right? And that's why I want to call out like all these EDH players. Like, why do you care about your investment this much? Is it consumer confidence? What are you talking about consumer confidence for? This is not an investment portfolio, as I mentioned. The cards that are valuable in this game should have value. But if they're worth this much, are we misguiding our anger? Shouldn't we be more upset at Wizards of the Coast for not reprinting Mana Crypt legitimately into more rare slots, into more accessible sets, into like standard environments or something like that where it can be heavily hated out or something? Like, why don't we hate on Wizards of the Coast for always not directly acknowledging the secondary market, but based on putting Comet Storm at rare along with other rares that are now mythics? Why don't we fault Wizards of the Coast for that? We're always happy to go to the local game store and open up packs and do this and do that. We're happy to scream on Twitter, but not speak with our wallets. I don't understand. It's like, it's the misguided anger of it all, right? Like y'all are just quick to get mad at the thing that is right in front of you, right? But not at the underlying issue. And this whole situation is kind of like, you know, Ari Lax put it really well in a tweet. I believe it was a response, if I pull it up here, to Cedric Phillips, where the commander ban is kind of very similar to if, you know, Wizards of the Coast banned like all fetch lands except for the Marsh Flats and Arid Mesa. You know what I mean? Like it's very similar vibes where they've banned all these cards of similar power levels or used in similar contexts as in higher power, but then they left some behind. There still are big power vacuum cards. There still are cards that are extremely powerful that now people are going to gravitate to more in terms of playability. But again, the reasoning for those like Sol Ring is potentially that they are the identity of the format. And I feel like this whole like identity thing has been going around for so long with constructed formats. I've heard it used ad nauseum, pun intended, by the way. The modern format has largely lost its identity. It's Modern Horizons block constructed. Let's be honest. It's no longer that turn 4 format that is, you could build a deck and have it kind of grow over time and adapt over time. It is now Modern Horizons block constructed, where your deck might be viable now, but it won't be viable past the next Modern Horizons. But Legacy is largely kind of withstood some of that. I should say, largely, because a lot of the stalwarts are still around. Like, we're not power creeping out like Daze and Force of Will, but again, cards like Daze and Force of Will are very key to the environment. Now, I'm not saying we should be banning Force of Will, but a lot of people have discussed the bannings of Brainstorm, the bannings of Daze specifically, and how cards like this maybe limit too much of the creativity in the format and police too much of the format. And I mean, I think there's merit to that argument, but again, as a very Legacy adjacent player, I don't have my own kind of I don't have my own bones in the game. I think the analogy there is wrong, but you know what I mean. When it comes to these type of decisions, players want communication and they want transparency in the decisions that they made. But the RC community can't have brought this up, because the last thing you need is in the previous announcement for them to be like, we are looking at Mana Crypt, Jewel Lotus, and thing. Whether or not we ban them, who knows, but we're looking at them. Mass selling. Everyone is going to be selling these cards. So no, that is market manipulation. They cannot be doing that, because the last thing you need is for them not to like do anything in the next announcement. All of a sudden people are buying it back up, the card spikes all over again. That's the last thing you need. So communication is not the way to do this. They've been looking at this for a while. I think a lot of EDH players need to now look at the cards that they're purchasing for $100, $200, $300 and really understand, is this a card worth your time purchasing? Can I proxy this card? Can I now have an open conversation with the group that I have to be able to play the cards that I want, to try the decks that I want? Is it more accessible for me? Is it better for me to just spend, 20, 30, 50 bucks at like a local print shop to print out a couple like EDH decks or a couple staples throughout EDH decks, put them all over and test if they're actually worth buying? Because a lot of times people buy these cards, they're 1 card out of 99. Heck, they may not even be tutorable. And then people feel like they have a significant impact on their deck. Largely speaking, folks, they don't, especially if you don't have consistency in your deck and you're playing lower power cards, lower power decks, I should say. A lot of these cards won't have that impact of $100 to $200 that they have on your personal life and your personal finances. Now, again, I'm no financial expert. I'm just a real person trying to put out some real advice to all of y'all. Magic the Gathering is not an investment platform. You should not be treating it as such. Your card should have value, of course, because it is a trading card game, but it shouldn't be hundreds of thousands of dollars. It should be maybe like $100 max, less than that, probably, and it should be more accessible to people out there. We want people playing the game, not investing in the game. It's not just about the pretty little colors, it's about the gameplay mechanics embedded in the cards themselves. The word soup and the increasing of the amount of things that cards do these days is very important for us to analyze, and we need to be directing our anger not at the rules committee, but at Wizards of the Coast for not even providing good angles of reprints and not doing so effectively, so that Mana Crypt could be lower in price, so that Jewel Lotus could be lower in price. And I don't buy that whole kind of BS about like not being able to print cards in standard. Again, let's be honest here. A lot of cards that could be printed into different sets that have a lot of high value are not being included in there for bogus like lore reasons. I mean, the lore is just screwed up at this point, right? You have the Omen patch where every character can be at every place at any time. Oko could be wearing like cowboy hats in one point, and Oko could be wearing a dildo in another part, like a second phallic object, right? And that'd be perfectly fine because we're in the PP plane, right? Like it's all possible thanks to the lore. You can write anything, but somehow the lore is so scuffed that we then enforce our card design decisions upon the individual power of our standard sets, which then inform the reprint value and the playability of certain cards throughout Magic the Gathering. It's really dumb. We could just arbitrarily print Mana Crypt into standard, but maybe we could just ban it outright or something. Or maybe we could limit it in such a way where the artifact hate is so powerful that it doesn't need to be there. We could print Mana Crypt in rare. We could print Mana Crypt at uncommon in Commander Masters, but the whole idea of consumer confidence is the problem that's holding us back. Yes, again, I do want to highlight for the 50th time because people are going to yell at me. Your card should have value. Again, it is a trading card game, of course, but it doesn't mean it becomes inaccessible. That's the key. People should be able to buy the cards they want. And yes, you should be able to be angry that your cards are losing value. but not to this level. It's insane to me that people care more about the price of the $300 card than the general state of the format. Yes, from an objective standpoint, Jewel, Lotus, and Mana Crypt and Nadu and Dockside Extortionist were net negatives on the game itself. Nadu being banned in Modern, Dockside being talked about for so many years, Mana Crypt just being this card that Wizards of the Coast never wants to print to any reasonable state. These are cards that fast mana, positive on mana, and a lot of negative things happen in terms of crazy fast starts in terms of the value. And that's been spoken about in the article as well. These cards were negative for the format. And yes, are there other cards that are also bad for the format that are really polarizing when they enter Rhystic Study, Smothering Tide, all this stuff? But again, those tend to be higher costed cards. There are still fast mana angles that you can take with cards that cost 1, 0, whatever. Those can be looked at by the RC community separately. But these cards specifically were bad for the format. A lot of people are more so mad at the lack of communication, the lack of uniformity in the ban decision, and also the fact that they lost value in their cards. All three of these reasons don't make sense. The communication angle, again, because if they were to communicate this early, this could be seen as market manipulation. The whole kind of lack of the lack of people being able to keep to their collections, which again, I'm laughing because it's absolutely silly. Again, for the 50th time, this game is not an investment. This is a trading card game. It is a luxury hobby. You are here to play. You're spending all this money to do what? Gain more money? Go invest in the stock market. Go take an accounting class and use the snowball method to play off your credit cards. Don't invest in Magic cards. Magic cards are here to play. This is a trading card game that you play. You collect the cards, you put decks together, you buy sleeves, you buy all these things, you do all these crazy late game capitalism, inner sleeve, outer sleeve garbage nonsense just to be able to sell your card and hold its value. Magic players are the wildest people, like group of people in the world, and EDH players, I feel like a lot of them at the higher end have lost the plot. I've seen a lot of great comments in general about people just being excited for it, right? Because again, they could rule zero this, they could ignore the rules committee and still play with these cards because they don't want to trade these cards away. They don't want to put it away in the trade binder, but they still want to play with them. That's perfectly fine. I'm happy with you doing this as long as you let me know, and then I can kind of play around it or play for it. Then I'm cool with you playing Dockside Extortionist with me, as long as you have that conversation. And if anything, I hope that this decision promotes more discussion in the EDH community, and in the fury of everyone being upset with the decisions being made by the RC, I hope we can redirect our anger properly to Wizards of the Coast and their terrible ban philosophy, and the fact that they have the ability to make cards more accessible, but at the cost of consumer confidence and at the cost of the casuals not being able to afford some of these other strategies and get into these other formats. Not reprinting the cards that we need to play the game that we all love and enjoy.